Learning to lead a small group is one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done in my life. And so I'm excited about sharing with you some of the guidelines that I've come up with over the years of doing this. Some of these I've stolen from other people. Some of them are guidelines that I've created myself. But I want to give these to you because these guidelines will help you understand what is important as you lead and how to actually process the idea of leading a small group. First one is this. First guideline for leading a small group is that you are the leader, so you need to lead. You are the leader, so you lead. Most of our kids live in these very chaotic worlds. They're left to lead their own life. A lot of them are playing video games all day and watching movies all day, and they're on devices before I even knew what a device was. They're on those. And while what they need is unconditional love, they also need to learn that there are healthy boundaries in this life. There are healthy boundaries of how to have relationships and how to talk to an adult, and how to submit to authority, and all those kinds of things. And so one of the things that we need to understand is that you are the leader. You've been put in this place by God, and so it's your job to lead them. They are thrust all the time into adult-like situations, and these students don't know how to navigate that very well. So if you can come into their world, help lead them, help create some boundaries, help give them some idea about how to move forward in their small group, how to interact with other students, what are healthy behaviors and what are not healthy behaviors, you will find your small group experience to be so much better if you take the reins of that small group and lead. Second thing that you need to do for having a guideline for having a healthy small group experience is that you need to really embrace this concept that rules without relationship equal rebellion. Let me say that again. Rules without relationship equal rebellion. I'll give you an illustration of what this means and then kind of explain it. When I first was in youth ministry, there was a student named Nick, and Nick would come up to youth group, and he would sit. We had this big plush chair that he'd sit in, and I'd go over to Nick and I'd say, "Hey Nick, we're gonna go play this game," and he'd say, "I'm good, dude." I'd say, "No, Nick, come on, you need to come." And he'd say, "I'm good, dude." And I'd say, "Nick, I'm serious, you need to come right now." And he'd say, "I'm good, dude." You see, Nick had learned that adults really don't have any ability to move them to do anything. He was rebellious towards me. He was rebellious towards my leadership. He did not want to submit to it. Over the next year, I spent, every time Nick was there, time investing in him. I spent time hanging out with him. I spent time getting to know him. I asked him questions. He was into skateboarding. I asked him all kinds of questions about skateboarding. I got to know him. And it wasn't but a year later that we had been playing some basketball, and this student got a little worked up, and he threw up all over the floor. It was disgusting. I remember, I will never forget the moment that I went up to Nick and I said, "Hey Nick, can you grab a mop and go clean that floor?" And Nick's response stuck with me my entire life and will stick with me my entire life. He looked at me and he said, "I'm on it, Kent." A year later, I remember walking down the hallway that day as Nick was getting out the cleaning supplies and cleaning up this other kid's throw up, and I remember thinking, what was it that just happened? A year ago, this kid was saying, "I'm good, dude," and now he's cleaning up throw up for me. I think it's because I honored this guideline of small group leadership, that rules without relationship equal rebellion. What it means is that if you don't have a relationship with a student, you can give them the rules all day long, but if they don't love you, they're not going to honor those rules. See, it used to be that students were taught to honor authority, to honor people who are in leadership, but they're not really taught that anymore. The only way that you get honor from a student is to have a relationship with them. The only way kids really, really, truly listen to you is for them to know that you truly listen to them. And so if you're going to be in the small group leadership model where you're trying to build a relationship and impart information to them and help them grow to know Jesus, you have got to make your relationship with that student vital. This matters. Rules without relationship will equal rebellion. The third guideline is just a real simple one. Never be alone with a student. You should never be alone with a student. In our society, there's too much danger for you. There's too much risk for you to be left alone with a child and have that child potentially make claims about what you did while you were alone with them. If you are ever in a position where you're alone with a student, you need to go find another adult to be with you. You need to find one of our teen volunteers to help you. You need to talk to the person in charge and say, hey, I'm not very comfortable with this. This is a non-negotiable in our children's ministry. You are never to be alone with a student. This includes when you take them to the bathroom. This includes when they need to go into a classroom to get a Bible or something. You are never, ever to be alone with a student. Fourth guideline is a real simple one. It's just having appropriate touch. Touch is a very powerful communicator of love and care in our society. One of the things that I loved the most about my grandma is that she would stand behind me and she'd put her hand on my back, and she had long grandma fingernails, and she would scratch my back while she stood there. And I just remember that touch conveying a lot of love and care. We want to be able to have that with these kids, but in a healthy way. And so there's some healthy things that you can do. One of them is called the youth minister hug, or the side hug. And that's where you can give a kid, especially a little kid, have them come up to your side and just give them a hug from the side. You can put your hand on their head and rub their head and say, hey, how's your week been? You can put your hand on your shoulder. There are ways to have touch and communicate that you care about these students, but to have it be appropriate. It is inappropriate for you to ever have a frontal hug with a student, especially if you're a lady, because you don't know what that might be conveying to these kids. You don't know the kind of world that they've come out of, and it's very possible that for some of these students that we're going to be working with, that they're coming out of a world where a touch by an adult has sexual connotations in it. And so we need to honor those students. We need to never put ourselves in dangerous positions, and you need to have appropriate touch with them. One of the things I'd encourage you to do is, if you're physically able, get down on their level. Get down on one knee, put your hand on their shoulder, and talk to them. That's such a profound way for a child to have an adult engage them. Next guideline for leading a great small group is for you to have everyone in a circle. This is one of the mistakes I see small group leaders doing a lot, is they'll create a circle for everybody to talk, and there will be one or two students who sit outside of the circle. They're kind of behind everybody else. And the problem with this is that while Jimmy is up here talking, little Joey behind him cannot see his face. And so what is little Joey doing? He's playing around. He's not paying attention. He's not actually a part of the group. You need to make sure that whenever you create a circle, and I would suggest that every conversation you have with these students is in a circle, that you are making sure everyone is in the circle. That brings us to the sixth guideline. The sixth one is this: you need to have everyone in a chair. Every single student needs to be in a chair. Now, the reason for this is really simple. Chairs provide a physical boundary for your students. If you've ever had kids and you've had them sit on the floor and they're like doing this and they're like flopping all around, the reason they're doing that is because there's no physical boundary for them. And while it sounds silly, it is important for students and children to have physical boundaries that limit where their motion can go. So by putting them in a chair, you're having them face you, and they're facing a specific direction. It also helps get their mind in a focused manner. So getting everybody in a chair is really important. The seventh guideline is this: you need to guide the conversation. You're going to have small group questions. You're going to have a specific amount of time during each of your small group sections for you to have your conversations with these students. And it's important for you to take the reins and guide the conversation. There are several types of students that you might have in your small group who are going to be difficult to bring out. They're going to be difficult to get them to talk. Some of them, they're going to talk too much, and you're going to have to figure out ways to quiet them down so you can let other kids come in and talk. I have I have several different types of students that you might encounter, and I'm going to put that as a resource for you to look at and download along with this video. And it kind of just says, here's a kind of student, the talker, and here's what the talker student looks like. They talk too much, they dominate the conversation. Here's how you deal with that. Here's some strategies. And so this was written for teenagers, but I think it all applies really well in a children's ministry. So as you guide the conversation, looking for ways to keep the conversation moving and not let the kids in your small group dominate the conversation. Last thing I would say is this. is that when you ask questions as a small group, and this is small group leader, and this is probably the very most important guideline, so I'm not even having it in the list. This is kind of its own separate section that you need to think about, and this is probably the biggest mistake that I see any small group leader making. And the mistake is this, that when they ask a question, the small group leader answers the question. Here's why that's a mistake. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor real quick. We're going to do a quick exercise. I want you to think about the most exciting vacation you ever took as a child. You got it? You got what it was? Now, here's the deal. If you're like me, when I asked you that question, it probably took you a moment for your brain to process. Now, you didn't register that your brain was processing it. You didn't even register that you had to be quiet for that moment while your brain was processing, because you were up here in your head thinking about what the most exciting, adventurous vacation you ever took as a child was. You were thinking. And what happens when we think oftentimes is that we go quiet with our mouth. You see, the reason why it is the biggest mistake that small group leaders make is to ask and then answer their own question. The reason they do that is because the moment they ask a question, this is what they hear. Do you know what the small group leader does? Their heart starts to beat a little faster. They start to think, oh no, these kids, they're not listening. They don't care. They don't have an answer. And so immediately, because you've thought about the question already, you've already have the answer, you start to say, oh, well, when I was little, we went to Yellowstone and we did this and we did that. And do you know what just happened with all of your students? You just stopped them from thinking. They have stopped their thinking, and now they are listening to you. And what you're doing is you're creating a pattern for them that says he or she is going to ask a question, and then they're going to answer it, and I am not expected to do anything. One of the most effective things I've done is I will wait 15-20 seconds of just complete silence before ever speaking again. After I'll ask the question, I'll wait 15 to 20 seconds of silence, and if I don't get an answer, I will say this: hey guys, I am going to sit here until you answer my question. Do you want me to rephrase it for you? Do you understand the question? I'll kind of help them understand. And what you are doing is you're setting a precedent that if these students are in your group, they are going to talk. If these students are in your group, they're going to answer the questions. They're going to participate. You are building boundaries about what it means to be a part of your small group. If you hold on to even just that one fact, that one idea, this one big idea that don't answer your own questions, you'll find your small groups to be more productive than anything else you do. Thanks, and I can't wait to hear about how your ministry goes in your small groups. If you are learning some techniques that you think would be helpful, I would love for you to share those with me, and maybe we can make a video about those together.